Hey, Mitch, I got a question for you. Uh, I am a little long in the tooth as far as from the days of my marching. I'm about 30
of
years removed
of your greatness.
of my greatness in my prime. I said that once to somebody, remember? And he's like,
Hmm.
I saw those lines. They're not all that.
Back in the
Back in
1900s.
the 1900s, yeah. But one thing I see with people from my era and probably your era now too, you're not too, you're like a generation maybe behind me. We tend to get stuck on what the activity was to us and want it to be that and nothing more. Is there a clinical reason why that is? I mean, what would you say happens at that? And what are some good tools for us to just let go and be able to accept the evolution of the activity? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the psychological principle behind that really is the kind of fear of losing your strength. Okay, so there's the human development is long lasting. There's some theorists about this guy named Erickson, and really, like if you think of drum corps, what's really cool about it too is that you most of these people are on they're in the one of the most adventuresome times of their life. It's actually the activity is a good match for this adventure. It's not just the beats. I love the competition. I love the excellence. It's awesome. But I also remember driving around a bus like around in Wyoming, like around a Snake River, and I'm like, dude, what? This is ridiculous. This is like an adventure. It's not just playing some drums. So usually, that gets imprinted, and anything that moves us away from strength, we tend to not want to do that, right? So I think the old school, how come they're not playing all these flams or whatever it is, or they're all doing all this stuff. It is more of their fear of like their strongest time is being pushed away, being put some dirt over it. Now, for human being, that happens a lot. You can kind of that usually is masking the fear of death. That's they're moving further away from their strength towards this thing that's scary. But if you can help reframe what death is with them, like, hey, listen, man, this happens for everybody. Everybody from the 1800s is dead, every single one. If you can take that destination being less scary, they don't hold on to their old strength anymore. And then they can enjoy the vitality and remember that observational learning. Shoot, you can experience that strength through watching the young, strong ones. You can re-experience it, right? So they'll evolve if they're not afraid of what's coming. Like, hey, man, your adventure is what it was. You enjoy that. That was great. Now they're in it too. So I think it's that the psychological principle of fear of development and eventually fear of demise really is what that is.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
No.
not going to stop people from commenting
Oh
hate
yeah.
comments, but I love that insight,
Yeah,
Mitch.
and it totally makes sense. The fear of I guess not being relevant anymore, not being in the prime.
Hmm.
Demise, the demise.
Well, I mean, and funny enough, exactly what you're talking about, Mitch. I think Robert and I experience in just in the fact that when we create our lot content and stuff like that, we're kind of doing a version of what you said, which is like we're observing and we're documenting current greatness, you know, and just like you have pointed out, which I didn't even realize, we're experiencing it, through the observation, through the documentation.
And I think also what you're doing is so important because you're archiving the adventure for them. They I don't think the member, like, I didn't march a couple years, which is weird. Okay, but I was out and got to come back and really experience it. It wasn't too late. I was able to do it. What I'm trying to tell you is, like, I think when you're in it, it's really difficult to understand how special it is and how those times are very limited. You're not going to be in that adventure state for very long. You need to get as many in as you can so you have some stories to tell later. So your archiving of it, I think, is so critical to the soul of it, because these young people are going to, these videos, they'll probably watch more when they're 30. They're going to be like, I remember that. So I think what you're doing is really special. And necessary, and it's more than just, oh yeah, I remember that playing those nights. It's something far bigger. And so I think you're really really adding something to the activity that's going to be valued more than you realize. It'd be like an uncle who passed away who gave you a little video session, right? Time you're never going to get back with this guy, and you can replay it over and over.
something I wanted to bring up before we jump into the charts and everything like that was before when we were talking about that sort of the social thing and the connectiveness. You use the word brotherhood a lot, and I don't want anybody in our audience to jump up and say, "Well, what about the women?"
Yeah.
Right? We all know. I mean, what Mitch is talking about there is that feeling of connection that we have with each other that is very familial, you know. And but there's definitely a lot of women out there that are part of, helping create that connection and experiencing that connection currently.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would say that that structure is below gender, so it's a universal. They'll experience it the same way.
Yeah, I think you just use brotherhood just as a generic term, not to define like, well, it's only men. It's just brotherhood and just a term. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a connectedness is probably the better way to say it. Again, you can see how long my teeth are.
Shall we jump into the material that you have prepared?
Yeah. What do you have prepared for us, Mitch?
Yeah. So, just wanted to kind of like talk about how to reframe things. Let me show you how a psychologist would do, how it kind of would move into how an instructor can do it and an individual can do it. And Rob, I think that's a good spot for the old school new. It'll fit right in there, if you agree. But this is it in a nutshell. Um, not to bore you, just like styles of playing drums, there are many ways to do psychology. You could play drum set, you could play timpani, you could play marimba, you could play styles within those instruments. It's a lot of ways. Psychology is like that. And they kind of are organized basically on the depth of which you hit a mind. Okay. So there are very deep therapeutic kind of approaches. This would be like Freud and Jung, my favorite. These are very, very deep things. They are literally playing in unconscious spaces, which, can you imagine how difficult that is? Like, just pick the word. People are not aware of these places. These approaches are going into places people are not aware of. It's very difficult to work with them there. This is the reason we dream in pictures, is because you can't get to it any other way but through imagery. So you have psychological approaches that go really deep. Then you have very light approaches, something like solution-focused therapy. That is very much not going into the deep reasons of what's behind what you're doing. It's changing what you're doing. And then we'll look at the deep. This approach, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the most common used, and it is a middle range. It gets you into the water, the kind of not the deep end or the shallow end, in the middle. And if it's too much for people, you can go into the shallow end. And if someone's ready to go dive in, you could go dive in with them. And so cognitive behavioral therapy is the way to arrange, probably the best way to put it, this relationship between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And the knobs we talked about, a lot of times the knobs will be off in these three spots: treble, bass, mids, I guess. And so if it's a feelings thing, you adjust the feelings part. If it's a thought thing, you adjust the thoughts part. If it's a behavioral thing, you adjust the behavioral part. And so it kind of, they all interact together. Depending on if you're working with someone who's really smart, the thought part is usually what you're into. If you're working with someone really young, it's way more behaviors. They don't have a lot of sophisticated thoughts. You're working on what they do. And so let me give you an example clinically on how this can go. And then I'll give a VK example. So this relationship, well, let's reverse it. Let me do the VK example first. So let's say that you go to a situation where, one of the tour moms is stirring that Kool-Aid, man, with her arm, right? What's going to happen? You experience that, and the thoughts are, man, that's gross. The feelings are, oh no. And the behavior is, I'm out of there. I'll take a Sprite. So like, they kind of work like that. Together, they interact all together. If someone's like really depressed, right, and they got like this is going to sound, this is like in the weeds a little bit, maybe like talking about the upstroke of a grace note, but in psych terms. If someone's super depressed, most of the time that has to do with thoughts. There are feelings they feel sad, very sad, but they're usually about thoughts, and they tend to go something like, the future is going to be a failure. Why even try? And the depressive feelings are actually adaptive because they stop you from failing. You see, you can't take any more failure. So if you're depressed, you don't want to do anything, because if you do things, you're going to fail at it and it'll put you further down. So if I'm working with somebody like that, I won't even touch the thoughts. I will have them do things. I'll work on the behaviors. So for me, clinically, when they're very depressed, the behaviors is the key. They have thoughts of, I'm going to fail. Okay, we're not going to touch it. How about we make you succeed a whole bunch of times? And we just take the goalpost of success and make it really easy. Okay, you're sleeping 20 hours a day. We're going to sleep 19 hours and 45 minutes tomorrow. And the next day, 19 hours and 30 minutes. And in fact, after you get up, I don't even want you to get out of bed, stay in bed. You're just going to roll over to the other side of the bed. And then the next day, you're going to roll over to the other side of the bed and put your sock up. And then you're going to put your feet on the ground. And you keep going to where they keep succeeding. The bar, they keep experiencing success. If they do it enough, success and failure cannot be in your mind at the same time. It's one or the other. So if I hit them with a bunch of successes, they don't have thoughts of depression. It disappears. It's the same thing in a performance level. The reps is the behavior. It'll keep the I'm going to make a mistake lower. But these are the knobs that you use. So if I'm doing clinical work, this would be the way I do that. I can use these knobs. So for children and people who maybe don't have strong intellectual abilities, the behavior is the key. You're dealing with people that are very feely, very artsy people. Sometimes females are a lot like this. You're really around putting borders on the feelings. Okay, you can feel this way, but only for so long. You put borders on it, and then the thoughts aren't that big of a problem. But mostly it's with the thoughts. So cognitive behavioral therapy is really about restructuring the thoughts so that your behaviors and feelings adjust in healthier ranges.
How can we apply this in a marching arts, environment? What's a good example of, like, I know you used the stirring the Kool-Aid. Let's say we're out in the middle of in the Midwest, the hottest part of summer, and they're not having it, and they start thinking all this, oh man, why am I still here? I should just go home. How do we get that person right into being a productive into a productive rehearsal mode, if that makes sense?
So I would look at the feelings. What they're feeling is a desire to quit. It's a feeling of escape, of avoidance. Okay. So we would think, well, what are they avoiding? So the thoughts would be, well, what is it why are you in this mode? Is this that you literally, maybe you made a mistake? Maybe it's that you had the wrong shoes. It doesn't matter. Whatever got you into that state. So if I were to work with them, individually, I would look at those thoughts and say, okay, let's look at you escaping the state a different way. You want to escape by a bad attitude. Okay, let's take a look at a better way to escape. You are only going to have this opportunity very infrequently. Like I would, so here's how I do it. Okay, my mind is in psych. Okay, so let me try to get to the psych part. If somebody's afraid of the 20th floor on an elevator, I would take them to the 100th floor, and they would be more terrified, but they could get to the 20th floor pretty easy. So I would imagine this person, okay, listen, man, you're 20 years old, we're mid-tour, you feel like, I don't want to do this, I want to go home. Let's imagine home right now. Let's imagine where you went home and you got third place instead of first because your effort wasn't that good. I want you to sit there and picture being at home, telling the story of why you gave up. I would imagine that over and over and over, to where the motivation is like, okay, I can tolerate some discomfort and repetition, but I'm going to get fired. I'm going to avoid the picture of me giving up at home. Let's focus on that. And so if you want to introduce a bigger fear, right? I'm not motivated. I don't feel it today. Cool. Well, imagine never being able to do this activity again, or being done with it and having regrets about it. How about now? Or if they're like, yeah, whatever, Mitch, sure guy, then I would just make it a matter of toughness for them. Okay, this is a matter of how courageous you are. So you want to tell your story to your children that you were a courageous person. You want to be able to tell yourself. I get this all the time with graduate students at the last couple weeks of school. This is where grandmas start dying every day. They resurrect and die again. And people they want to start giving up. I said, these times are the only opportunities you have. They don't feel good. They feel horrible. You need to lean into them as your only opportunities to build this kind of strength. It's the discomfort that you need to embrace it as that. It's not going to feel comfortable, but reshape your thought of this discomfort is me building strength, right? You're in the gym, the term of, you know, that feeling of pain is weakness leaving your body. Now you're leaning into it. You're not trying to avoid the pain. You're like, yeah, get this weakness out of here. These are those moments. So you can reshape those thoughts to avoid something worse.
Is that kind of what lies underneath a lot of this, is a reframing, a reshaping of what is a failure, what is a success, um, and their relationship with that. I mean, because it kind of feels like somebody can, when somebody falls into a spiral, right? So when they're on tour, or maybe they're in the middle of spring training and they hit a physical wall, they're exhausted, right? They're sort of resources are pretty low, and all of a sudden to them, everything is a failure, right? And but that's a personal definition, right?
So, yes, so redefine failure. The way I redefine failure is quitting. That's the definition of failure for me. Everything else is learning, and it's just the adverse learning versus easier or hard learning. But failing is only this thing. It's when you quit. And we can then define harder learning as what you're in versus that, because only quitting is the fail. If they feel it's these other things, they're failing 8 times. If you quit, have you quit? No, you have an opportunity not to quit still. Let's lean into it. How much now, in your collective effort's gonna, you're competing against other people and wanting to quit too. That's what this drum line's about. You worked all this time getting your technique just right and the sound quality just right. Well, now comes the toughness part. The best groups have collective toughness that is exercised. That's why we lost in 99 in drums. We did not exercise. So I think that's the reframing. Look, they don't have to feel good all the time. It is a privilege to feel bad and go through it. That you got to look at it as a privilege, not a state.
And then the flip side, the success, and sort of reframing what actual success is. Like in the example you gave of, sleeping 19 hours and 45 minutes instead of 20 hours is a success, right? Like achieving that is a success. Waking up 19 hours and 30 minutes, you don't even have to get out of bed. Just the fact that you woke up at that time is a success.
Right. So win the times, win the blocks of rehearsal.
Right. So I feel like, again, this is something that I sort of got into the neighborhood intuitively with, because what I find is a lot of young performers, when they're trying to achieve it at a high level, they're basically trying to do everything perfect. So, which makes the possibility of failure higher, because any single one of those things, any single one of those aspects to what they're doing, if they fall short of whatever standard they've made up in their mind, that's a failure, right? A lot of times what I'll do with students is I'll say, forget everything. I want you to focus on this one thing. And it's usually something they're not usually focused on. It's some brand new sort of concept that I've introduced them to. And I say, let's just make that happen, and forget about all of the rest. And then reinforcing that when they do, right? So when they, like, I famously am weird about, like, having people play to a reference tone when they're on a drum. Like, who would think to do that? But I take out the met, so it's not about them being out of time. I say, let's do it one height, so it's not about volume and all of that stuff. It's literally just about, let's keep our sound consistent, and try to make that be something very achievable, right? And then rewarding, and then basically saying, we did it. Like, and by the way, there were adjustments to make there because you actually made the adjustment, and then slowly introducing the other things back in, rather than it being an everything all the time kind of thing.
try to think about it like a ratio, because what you just described is a ratio of success. So if you lower the target, the chance of succeeding in one thing increases. So you're if you try to concentrate on everything, you've increased the amount of failing that's possible. Now you've also increased the amount of success that's possible, but it's better to layer it, right? Let's listen to your sound quality in this passage. I want you to listen to the taps. Now play it again. We're going to focus on the time. Now we're going to focus on this accent, this flam, whatever it is. You're increasing the chances of success. Now, if I was an instructor, well, I've done this as an instructor, you're highlighting their strength. You see, it's self-reinforcing to do it right. You don't got to tell them, good job. Thank you for building strength. Would you like more? It's already reinforcing. You want to reinforce the resilience. Man, good job sticking through that. You've just added more power to your playing that way. Now you could suffer through the hard practice parts.
You're helping to build confidence.
And confidence is built through success. Okay. It's Bandura, the same guy, called it self-efficacy, which is the idea of how you believe you're going to succeed in the future based on what you succeeded in the past on. This is why drum corps is great, because man, you got this anchored success that then you could bring somewhere else. You can anchor. You can go back when you go back to a learning stage. There's lots of feelings of not being. A lot of drum corps guys who are very good go out there and come back a lot, and not all the time, because the feeling of not being that confident and competent is hard to get through again, right? There's a saying that your last greatest success is your biggest barrier to your new success. It's true. When I went out into this world, I had to say I'm starting from zero. Any success I had in drum corps didn't matter. I'm zero now. And that being able to reference those success in the past is what has helped me continue to be successful in whatever ways I have. I mean, I'm not like a baller or anything, but just definitely whatever successes I've had, I've been able to reference backwards. That's self-efficacy. So on a smaller scale, on a rehearsal, the more successes that you can highlight as an instructor that they may not see, they will get that ratio. They'll start to feel it. And then again, imagining success, imagining the failure, integrating the failure, I think, is the hardest thing for instructor to do, because the old school, it's like, don't make the mistake. Okay, that's unrealistic. It's not possible to not make a mistake. No one's had a perfect run. I don't care about 87 cadets or whatever, maybe 89, whatever it was. Perfect. Okay. Like there's something in there. Let me just nerd out for a real quick second on that. This is really important for instructors. Look, the Greeks thought perfection was possible. They lived in a world and a mindset. Okay. The world they saw was where perfection was possible. They saw a symmetrical world. The reason why art in those times, there's statues and drawing, architecture, all of it, the reason it's so sought after is they were chasing perfection they thought was possible. Now, I know it sounds strange, but the level of excellence to try to get to that is what created this incredible art. And a drumline could be a little miniature version of it. Pythagoras, which was a cult, not just the triangle guy, he was a very, very smart philosophical guy. He figured out mathematical things. He stumbled upon something not symmetrical, and they were banned from talking about it. He wouldn't let it be shared that the square root of 3 is not ever going to be symmetrical, that the world isn't perfect. That's what he stumbled upon. So perfection is impossible. If you set it as a standard, yeah, maybe you're striving for it, but you will fail because it's not possible. You see? So reframing like 99% of excellence, that's what we're going for. And let's look at the failure. That's a psychological principle of the shadow for Jungian psychology, the deep, dark things. Someone's in a car accident and you're like, there's a party that's like, I'm glad it wasn't me. No one wants to talk about that side of the human being, but that's the psychological equivalence of practicing the failures is that shadow stuff. You have to bring out the dark stuff, and integrating those things is where you get the most power. So if you're saying, hey man, we don't fail, good luck. You're never going to be in that level. You might have a lucky break where every dude in your drum line, or female too, whatever, was luckily on the same page. It'll be a roll of the dice, but it won't happen the next day. You can guarantee that. But if you're like, look, we're going to go for a sustainable 95% of perfection, and we're going to talk about the 5 when it doesn't happen on an individual level, on a group level, that drum line can get there. They can achieve 95.
But why is it so hard for us to not accept or want to accept that 5% of it's not going to be 100%?
Oh, Rob, you couldn't ask a better question. Because human beings are desperate for control. This
That
is
makes
the
sense. Yeah.
this is the reason that conspiracy theories are an example of this. Look, the real reality, if you go, I'm sorry, guys. I know it's about drumming, but look, the real guy, the guys who study physics, the guys who are looking at the most fundamental things, they realize, and you can see in economics, it's everywhere. There's only so much level of understanding that we can have. For some reason, there's a barrier to it. David Lynch movies are about this idea. But we come across it to where, look, the actual reality is kind of like the Wizard of Oz. We don't understand how it's all working, and we can't. And so what happens is, because that's scary, okay, here's the psych principle on that. A known fear is less scary than an unknown fear. Both scary, but if you know you're afraid of a snake, you could do something about it. I'm gonna learn about snakes. I'm gonna stay away from snakes. I'm not gonna buy a snake skin, whatever. Okay, cool. If it's unknown, you don't know where the fear is coming from. How do you work against it? You stay afraid. And so what happens is humans will invent ritualistic things to make it feel like it's predictable. That's what the conspiracy theory is. It's that. It's a algorithm for control, and it feels damn real. Let me give you an example. That's a very easy one that I use all the time. Look, if you see that, okay, if you were to decide to buy a car tomorrow, Rob, what's your favorite car, man?
Let's go Corvette, Chevrolet Corvette.
Corvette, awesome. Corvette, V8, zoom zoom. Dan Wall's got one of these, I think. You got this Corvette, man. The second you decide, okay, I want to buy a Corvette, do you know how many Corvettes you're going to see the instant you decide you want to buy that one? Now, is it possible that in 20 minutes they made like 100 more Corvettes and got them out on the street? Nope. Same amount of Corvettes as always, but your perception is, ooh, there's more of it, right? That feature, your perception is can be manipulated a little bit to feel like if you have a conspiracy theory, you will actually feel the control. Like you will feel like there's more Corvettes, but it's not there. It's the mind will ask for control on things. And you can see it with Major League Baseball players, big time. It's the most one you could see. Like hitting the ball is the hardest thing ever, right? They asked Deion Sanders, what's the hardest sport? Oh, baseball by far. Because the percentage of hitting that ball is like almost none. They have the most rituals. You go up there, got the socks, you ready? Every time. Or a free throw in basketball. We fill in the rituals because we really can't get to perfection. See, we create kind of alternatives to the perfection. We create a story that at least fill in the gap so it's not as unknown. Because again, the mind wants a known fear.
It's funny that you bring up the baseball ritual one, because just the other day at the game, I was pointing out to my wife, Shohei Ohtani's his ritual. He goes up, he puts the bat down and measures the distance from a certain point on the plate, a certain point in the batter's box. He'll step in, he'll take his first swing. If it's, if he's not doing it, he'll step out, he'll take the helmet off, shake the hair, get back in, and it's a ritual every single time he goes at bat.
And our activity, anybody who's ever been to a lot, our activity is full of these kids doing rituals.
Oh, yes. The same shorts for rehearsals.
Well, the same shorts. I mean, like they'll dap each other up the same way at the same time before they come in on like a certain exercise, to the point where you'll even notice like subconscious things where the body it'll literally somebody's eyes will dart over to the left or to the right at the same point every single time you watch them play a particular part. Yeah, so it's like it's not something completely alien to us. Like, because what we're doing is so repetitive, so high stakes, we're doing that too automatically without even thinking about it, right? Right, Mitch?
Yes, and it's because it's an anxiety control issue. It brings the anxiety down, and the lots are pretty anxiety provoking. More, as I mentioned earlier, more so than the show. Just their people are closer to you, and they've watched the YouTube video. They know the parts.
So
Oh yeah.
is the ritualistic thing healthy
Yes,
and unhealthy? Like, is it both?
if the anxiety is controlled, it's healthy.
Okay.
If it's not, it's a waste of your time. Now, it's it'll work no matter what. Like, let me pull out a rocking chair moment. Back in '99, I purposely made it. I made the warm ups as much of control that I had. I wasn't the instructors, but I tried to make it very repetitive in the way we did it. For that reason alone, we're going off to war. It's this idea of where the battle of the field, so to speak, will be less. We're beginning that earlier, and let me tell you why that's important. You see, the anxiety response is time limited. It's biologically impossible to stay on for very long, and it's either on or off. There's no kind of on. It's either on or it's off. If you begin the ritual earlier, you put yourself in this higher state of anxiety in a sense where there's a show before the show. And even on the bus, like, start it there. And in the high school groups, we would begin by walking off the bus. Like, that was the ritual. It started there. It wasn't a lot. It was the way we would walk off. And so if you start that earlier, the anxiety time limit will drop by the time you hit the show. Because it's time limited, 20 to 60 minutes individually on average, you will make sure your line is at a more optimal level. They won't be overly anxious because they physically can't.
Wow.
So if you're treating someone for anxiety, for example, it's great because it will work every time. You see that elevator example is it. If you force someone to be around what they're afraid of, what happens is they'll get that fight or flight, but you force them to stay. There's a hospital in Boston that does this, related to Harvard, McLean Hospital, and it's called flooding. They do it with people with OCD. And a friend of mine used to be someone there, and that was their job, the flooder. Oh, you're afraid of driving? We're going to go drive every day. And so it's like the worst job you can imagine. If you're taking
I can
people to their
imagine you're
worst.
terrifying these people who are like, just thinking about it, driving probably scares the heck out of them. And now you're going to put them in a car and have to drive with them. Yeah.
And yeah, you're sitting next to them, man. They better have that double brake. So, but the idea, the treatment is about reforming the relationship to whatever they're afraid of. And it has more to do with memory than anxiety. Look, if you know the anxiety of the show, of whatever, your tryouts, whatever, if it's a known thing, okay, if you expose yourself to that for long enough, you're gonna end up in a natural state because the anxiety can't stay on. And so and for an instructor, it's about timing that out. Is to get them in a higher anxiety state in that lot, start that ritual, and then when they hit the show, they can't really be that anxious. Then their cognitive faculties are more useful, etc.
Would you say that that would help, like, if you have that, what I call, imposter syndrome, to get past that, is to just go at it head on and just do it?
So we get this a lot with the grad students, first year, second year student. They're like, I can't say anything about psychology. And they do feel like an imposter. They've used that word a million times. And I'll tell them, okay, well, let's talk about it. Psychology is a guess. There's no blood test. I'm a licensed psychologist, and it's a guess for me. So really, I'm not an imposter, and I still got to guess like you. Secondly is people who have PhD in psychology, not a lot of them. 1% or so. It's not that much. So really, if you pull out an average person from when you're at a university, you're around all of those 1%. It's like everybody's got a PhD, and it doesn't seem like that big deal. It's like a PhD in what? So what, you got one? What is it in? And so you're in an environment you're going to feel like an imposter, like that third string NFL guy, right? The truth is, you're the best athlete ever. You're going to be any but college guy. You're the best. That's what's real. The feeling is what's wrong. So I'll tell them, look, I can prove it to you. you have more psych training right now in your first year than 99% of the people you're going to deal with. You just don't feel like an expert. Well, what does it mean to be an expert? What's a professional? It's somebody who makes a living on a knowledge base. Well, how much knowledge do you have in this area right now? A lot. A bachelor's degree, a master's degree in this, you are more capable than you realize. Same thing with an individual. I don't feel very successful. Well, how many successes have you had? Or I do this with guys in the prison. I 2 days a week I work in a prison, and I'll get this a lot. I'll get guys who are like they feel like they're bad people because of whatever they did or whatever it is. There's a lot of different people in there. Um, some of them just had real bad situations, and they just made the best choice they could. So I'm working with someone like that, and like, man, I'm bad, man. I'm real bad. Look what I did. And I'll be like, do you feel bad? Yeah, man, I feel real bad. I said, well, bad people don't feel bad about what you did. So the fact that you feel bad means you're good. That's it. So I think it's reframing, as I mentioned before. The rituals help the anxiety response. It's all these psych principles like in action.
So a lot of what we've talked about so far has been mitigating sort of bad things, unhealthy things happening, intervention type scenarios. Is there specifically for drum corps and the time of year that we're in, is there a preventative sort of wellness? Things haven't gotten bad. We can actually train ourselves before we go to that bad place to exist in a healthier mindset as we prepare to do this thing and make that part of us stronger.
Yes, I think there is a way to that. Easier said than done because each individual person kind of brings their own reasons why they may not feel confident or whatever. I like to do this when it comes to talented people. It's so weird. You'll get very highly motivated. Drum corps is very good. You'll get very highly motivated people, hardworking, like legitimately good, strong people. And yet they feel, as Rob was saying, kind of the imposter side. It's the answer is related to that. Look, on the feeling side of things, that if you look at the triangle, like I'm feeling like I'm not going to do well, or I'm nervous about what's coming, or whatever it is, I will pivot towards responsibility. Okay. Look, you're talented and you owe for it. To people who are given great things, great expectations will follow. You owe this. Hey, man, I'm really, really smart. You owe going high level, whatever it is. Same thing here. You're talented, hardworking. You owe going through this hard thing you're about to go through. You owe. It's not a matter of feeling about it. Feel how you want. Feel bad about it, scared about it, but you owe going forward. Otherwise, give the talent away or give your spot away. So I think it's more like the responsibility of the talent applied to something that they're about to do that's hard is the best way to get them focused in on it. It's not the feelings about it. It's the responsibility of it. The feelings will become irrelevant because you'll replace the feeling of fear with pride.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Hey, Mitch, we're touching base a little bit about, teaching and stuff. What tips do you have for the young instructors out there that are going out and, we talked imposter syndrome and all that, but to what's a good way to put this? To go out there and to be good instructors. Like we come from an era where you kind of got beat up a little bit, but that was just common, Nowadays, that doesn't fly at all, Where's that fine line between being overly emotional while you're teaching and then being overly aggressive while you're teaching, if that makes sense?
And to piggyback on your question, Rob, a lot of what we've been talking about has been focused on the performer, but the staff is going through it too.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a lot of emotional, mental, psychological things that are happening with the staff as they are experiencing this with the members.
Impostor syndrome if you're a new staff member. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I see it. It's a great question, because I see it all the time with newer instructors. I mean, I take that back. I see it with all instructors.
Yep.
I see it with designers who've been doing this for decades.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's going through it. What advice do you have for them?
Okay. Well, this will touch upon a couple little things. Let's talk about, like, again, remember 90% is underneath and you're unaware of it. So let's tap into that. Let's talk about chimpanzees and leadership. Because instructors, essentially their issue is leadership. It boils down to leading, right? They're instructing, but it's a leader thing. So it fits into the hierarchy of leadership. All right. Chimpanzees, which we're damn close to, 99.9%, pretty close. Yeah. I like bananas myself. But anyway, the top chimpanzee ruler, the ones that stay on the top of the hierarchy, you would assume would be the toughest, gnarliest, get in your face all the time kind of monkey. And those monkeys don't last at all. What happens is, if you're a tyrannical instructor or chimp, the little other monkeys come together and shred you. The most sustaining leadership of true strength, and you can see this in any hero movie, they're all aware of this. It's what we're watching. We're watching this story replay itself. We're watching that monkey. These are you look, to be on top, you got to be strong. That's not, so instructors, you better be able to outplay everybody, at least to some level. Okay. And if not, you better be able to outdo something on them. Give them knowledge to get them to their cool, whatever it is. Okay. Float could probably outplay anybody with his two fingers, literally. So the idea is, you got to be strong. Cool. But to sustain, to get credibility as a leader and sustaining leadership, and I think some of the greats do this. I think of Ralph, of course, obviously, all the big boys. Okay. They take care. It's a supportive environment. Okay. It's the greatest leaders are the strongest, and they care for the ones that aren't as strong. So if you have someone making mistakes, it's about, you got to have a high standard. Like, we aren't going to accept that. Look, let me show you how to fix that. I'm not mad that you made it. Let me show you how not to make that. It's the supportive part. You can't be too supportive to where they're never learning and they suck, but they feel great about being in the drum line. Like, what's that? It has to be where you're pushing them. Now, here's the trick. What I'd like to do to keep that leadership hierarchy to where they're not going to come and revolt against you. Okay, which there's been some people on your podcast that have had that experience. High level instructors where the line shoot them up, and because the tyrannical way, that's what it does. The chimps each up. So look, supportive. Let's try that again. Here's what you're doing wrong. Apply it. But you still have to have a place of high demand. So how do you balance it? Here's the way I would say. To me, practice has always been the show. You're coming to perform in practice, okay? And I don't have to tell you guys. You know what I'm talking about. That makes the show easier, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll see this with NBA guys. They'll talk about the practices being harder than the actual game, so the game's easier, right? Baseball guy warming up the bat with the weights on it. So when he gets there, it feels like, same thing. Use big old giant sticks for a little while and your little sticks feel smaller and you got this confidence. All the same idea. The hard work to me for an instructor is, look, your individual practice, look, I can't be hard on you because the monkeys will come and chew me up. But you have to be a tyrant in your individual rehearsing. That's where the tyranny should come. Be tyrannical with yourself and that high standard. And then the instructor does not have to. You cannot be in a situation where there isn't someone getting pushed beyond their limit. Otherwise, the group won't improve. So it's where it happens. It should happen on the individual level. Now, Jocko Willink, I don't know if you know that guy, Navy SEAL guy. He's got a pretty famous podcast. Okay. So one time a caller came in. It's related, I promise. The caller came in. He's like, hey, man, I was driving with my family and this dude road raged me, man. And I didn't do nothing about it. And he was having all this guilt about his kids saw him kind of like not really rise up and all this. And I thought it was a really good question for a guy like Jocko, who's Navy SEAL trainer, pretty a badass guy, right? I was like, man, that's a really good question for a guy like that. How is he going to answer that? And he's like, look, fact is, you did the right thing. You could have got out. This dude could have had a gun. Your kids would have watched you die. Look, there's 1,000 reasons why not fighting that guy was the smart reason. But if you're feeling bad about it, go to the gym and learn how to fight by yourself. That's the time to get mad about it. If that you know you could handle it, if you just know like that dude's loud, but what I already know I can put him in a lock here, you're not going to feel bad about it. So it's where to apply the tyranny. Are you afraid of not standing up to somebody? Make sure you know how to fight, and you're not going to worry about it. Instructors, key them on that individual time of keep your individual practice at a high level. Don't make me call you out here. You call yourself out. All y'all call yourself out, and I will be supportive in giving you fine tuning on that. If you're coming sloppy, like as an instructor, I'm sending you home. I'm not going to put myself in a position to get mad about that. That's unacceptable. Go home and practice. Come back when you're ready. Next. So the principles of leadership are supportive, but strong. You have to be great. And if you're tyrannical, you're showing them you're not good enough. It's the loud guy in the bar. You know he can't fight. It's the quiet guys. Again, man, I'm working in a prison. This is always there. The loud guy, everybody knows that dude ain't no threat to them. It's the quiet guy. Be careful. And so instructors, I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, I remember I felt like I was that kind of player, that I was the one drumming every break, because either I didn't play something up to my own personal standard in my mind in the previous block, or something was about to happen and I wanted to ensure I was going to get the result that I wanted to. And it was probably made up in my head, but I felt like that's what I had to do in order to perform at a certain level. And maybe other people didn't have to do that.
Back in your era, did Scott used to call people out one at a time in the lot to drum and exercise like he does now?
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. You
Down the lines, all the time.
You practice for that moment, so you're not the guy that
Yeah.
messes that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Supportive, but strong. That's your best leadership style anywhere.
Yeah. And defining the like structure, right? And where the boundaries are and where the goals are, essentially, right? Like providing a lot of that information, and then the member knows when I go and I be tyrannical with myself, right? I know I know what direction I'm headed. I know what I'm looking to achieve, what line I'm trying to get across. You know?
Yeah. Hey, just one last thing on my end, because I know we've been running about 2 hours. This has been great. Now. This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
But mine's just kind of out there, and I want to know if it happens to either of you guys. You're asleep, you have this dream where you can't find your sticks or your mallets or your uniform, or you forget the music.
Don't know the show.
Yeah, don't know the show. Is that is that normal? Like, what causes that? Has there ever been any study about stuff like that you know of?
Yes, for sure. Many different ways to look at that study-wise. Research on imagination, dreams, etc. The subconscious areas of experience. That's the broadest way to put it. I have had those dreams. I had a dream. I mean, I was on the back sideline. I was aware. I just saw this, and I was like, and I think I was in a quad player. I mean, I haven't even played quads. I've had that. I have a cadets one. I've had a terrifying one. I don't know the show, and it's just like sticks out. I don't remember. That's a fear, right? Because the performance standard is so high, it's inevitable that your mind is chewing on those situations. Now it's crazy that we have them at the age that we are. Like,
yeah,
back
30 years later,
it shows you how high of a level of performance is there. But definitely, and the reason for that is the same, that 90% thing. The unconscious is extremely big and it's old. Now, the reason you dream it is because the only way that unconscious things can kind of bubble up is in images. It's the only way. And the reason is because the brain, look, language is new, real new. The outside of the brain, there's 3 layers to the brain. Essentially, the outside layer is the most new. And it grew very fast. It had to fold up on itself. There's a lot of theories about this. A lot of people thought we ate magic mushrooms and all that. But for whatever reason, it folded in and it's new. So our greatest fears and our sensations, like smells, are the oldest, the most sensational memory you can have because they're the oldest thing. And so we had smells before we had pictures. Language is so new that it cannot communicate with that depth. It doesn't, it's like the best example is more like computer coding. At the base level, we're talking about zeros and ones, which is a code to make electricity turn off and on that tells the computer to do things. On top of that is, kind of the basic input output systems. It's the language to tell those ones and zeros what to do without having to type up a bunch of ones and zeros. Command prompt. It says when you turn your computer on, that's the basic operating system. Then you have software on top of that. That's the best way to that's kind of how the brain works. So underneath is all this very primal kind of soup that comes up in images through dreams, and through art. You look at a piece of art, some of it, and you can have a terrifying feeling. Well, where's that terrifying feeling coming from? It's in there already. Something deep down there recognizes the picture, but the language can't say it because it's so old. There's no words. Look, if I were to tell you right now the feeling of hunger, you will not be able to describe it. And you'll say, oh, my stomach's growling. Nope, that's your stomach growling. It's not the feeling of hunger. It's a behavior associated with a hungry state. But tell me what it feels like to be hungry. You can't, because hunger existed before words. So the unconscious images existed before words. And so it can only communicate that way. So you have deep fears of, oh no, I forgot my music, that will bubble up in a dream. It's very fascinating. You can kind of, I'm not real skilled in this, but there's dream analysis where you could see themes in what comes up, and it is unconscious. They don't know it's happening. It's very fascinating to do that kind of work. But working with it's very difficult because you are literally unaware. But that's why you would dream. That's why you would dream it in the images.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mitch, do you want to talk about the logo behind you and the foundation that you founded?
So in the spirit of applying drum corps principles out into the quote unquote real world, I have been a psychologist for a while, good 20 years now. Our late great friend Shannon Church was also a psychologist as well. We kind of we went up in drum corps together and out into the world of psych together too. I did my initial training in school psychology. I went to Fresno State as an undergrad. I went to the University of Wisconsin for my grad work, which is in Madison, which I connected to Madison Scouts there. And so I became a school psychologist and I did that work. And then I went back in to do clinical through internships and whatnot. And that's how I got into the prison, did my clinical work. And so in doing the prison work, I think this is a drum corps thing too, kind of an efficiency thing. Working with people who have made it to the prison level can be very difficult as a psychologist because there's not a lot you can do. You can make their experience a little better, a little bit more insight for them to reflect on the mistakes, but the damage is largely done. A lot of times those guys are hardcore addicted to drugs. It's very difficult to get them in a different state. And so the only way I could sustain doing that kind of work without bashing my head in was to do the work in the prevention with the schools. And so I developed kind of drum corps level like structures to identify psychopathology early and to normalize social emotional learning rather than to be psychopathology. It's like, hey, you got to develop these social emotional skills that are natural to keep your psychology stuff in healthy ranges. So instead of slapping diagnoses on kids early, which is worse than the good work you would do, now they see themselves again as the ADHD kid, et cetera. You can really do damage that way. We develop systems where you don't need diagnoses. Whatever, ADHD, you got impulse control issues, like 1,000 people. Let's get yours into better ranges. Some people need one-on-one work for that. Some people need group work with that. Some can just learn it. So to make a long story short, developing that structure of prevention in the school, good kind of work in the community level, outpatient level, like going to a therapist. And then what we're working on now is a therapeutic farm, which is highly people that are psychotic, where they're not going to get back into the mainstream and they're dangerous because they get confused and hurt people. They don't really want to hurt people, but they're confused. So that structure, I built this nonprofit, the California Consortium for Prevention and Intervention, to do that. So we developed a whole structure like that does work in schools, and I train graduate students. We got about 1.5 million in funding last couple of years. We're able to hire a bunch of, I oversee it. I brought in people to supervise all the students. We have a training program. We bring them in to train them at a high level to work within that 5 tiers to get services more available and to make it non-pathological unless it's at this high level where it is pathological. Most people don't have psych issues or mental health issues. Most people are just slightly off. Let me just give you a quick little example. Look, there is a so-called mental health crisis going on. It's defined this way. Now, look, I don't think there aren't problems. There are. But if you look at the prevalence rates of most psychological disorders I mentioned earlier, they're very small. Okay. And they're highly genetic a lot of the time, or severe trauma. So it's unlikely that in one generation of people, and let alone in the last 20 years, that there would be changes in a mental health, those prevalence rates to where you'd have a true crisis. Think more what's going on, and the reason why our school work is good, and why building confidence with drumming is great, is that, look, what you probably have is an adaptive response to human beings that aren't socializing as much. This is probably more accurate. It's not real pathology. We are, as you mentioned, George, we are highly social. And we are you're taking a highly social creature whose safety and survival was dependent on the social stuff, and we isolate it. And I already hear this 1,000 times. Well, I'm on Facebook and I got 1,000,000 friends. Well, no, that's the fake you working with 1,000,000 fake them. You, the real you, ain't going with anybody. Maybe within your own family, maybe. So the fact is, it looks like a social creature who's being isolated, and they're having an adaptive response. The anxiety and depression is a response to that. Not that there's more anxiety and depression, it's as adaptive. Like, look, if you saw a fish and you threw it in the water that was too shallow and it started to gasp for air and like flip around, you would think something's wrong with the fish. I gotta help this fish. No. That's a reflexive, adaptive, that's what the fish should be doing. It's trying to gasp for air. Nothing's wrong with the fish. It's just in a state that is not enough oxygen around it. Give it deeper water and the fish will fix itself. I think that's really more what we're in. And so my efforts have been to try to increase the socialization in a healthy way and more specific way, just like in drum corps with how do we integrate failure? Well, how do we increase the opportunity to socialize in a meaningful way, in a sustained way early? I think that's what's going on. So this nonprofit that I made largely does that work.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah.
Mitch, is there, like I mentioned sort of at the top of the podcast, nowadays, and I don't know how much you're aware of this, but the actual bringing in of outside consultants as far as the physical health, a lot of times, pretty much every drum corps, I believe, has a physical training / medical staff that handles injuries and things like that. On top of that, these consultants or programs have developed workouts and things like that the corps can do in preseason, like when they're at home, to prepare their bodies for this moving forward. As far as this side of it, right? Until we get to that place where somehow, some way, corps have or outside people have developed actual programs that they're going to integrate as part of the drum corps experience. Until then, is there a responsible way forward for staff people to educate themselves, to be able to handle what you're talking about, all the things that we've talked about, right? Other than people DMing you, questions and like about situations that come up constantly. Because I've run into this a lot where I'll be talking with, somebody about why a certain audition maybe didn't go the way that they felt it should. And very quickly, I find myself like, we'll get into a part of a conversation where I'm going, we should stop talking about this because I'm not qualified to talk about this. And it would be irresponsible for me to continue talking about this. What is the responsible path forward until we get actual programs in place with regards to our activity?
Well, you're describing that imposter syndrome as Rob did in a different way. I think you're more qualified than you think. You have been a performer at that level. You have been an instructor at a high level. You're about to go on a tour. You're very thoughtful. I've played in a line with you. I was honored to do it. And I think you do have permission to work with that. I would say for instructor wise, two things. These principles, well, a lot of times they are doing things naturally, or they have heard from some of the greats that have trickled down over the years. These same principles, but not maybe put names to them or have been aware of them. They're kind of like lucky to stumble across them. So I would say you're qualified, number one. Two, you can look at some of these psych principles, that cognitive behavioral therapy stuff. Just take a look. A layman can read it and understand it. I think the activity, because this mental piece is an authentic part of getting to the excellence. It would be smart to have, it does not have to be me, it does not matter, but to have a clinic on this, to share a slightly packaged version for instructors at the WGI level, at the DCI level, and even groups to come and check it out, to kind of work with the instructors a little bit. It's no different than what we do as psychologists. We'll go to a conference on the guys who know this skill and they kind of, here's how to do it. So I think integrating the component of the mind in the way DCI and some of the higher level groups, in any group really, offers training. When I was doing judging, there was training for WGI judges that, here's the modern art of judging. I think you kind of do that with this psych stuff because there's not that many principles. And frankly, I don't think instructors could do damage per se to people, but sharing excellence is that's what we're selling here in drum corps. And if you can get more people drinking excellence, it helps the activity. And look at when people go out there and become successful. And I can't remember there's a DCI judge who I believe like an oncologist, high level medical guy, don't remember. But when these guys are up there, making $500,000, or they make companies that comes back to drum corps. So I think it's smart for Drum Corps International or the activity at large to kind of put together something like this to help instructors on some of these principles, and then refine some of that. Do it once a year, do it once for WGI, and just have it be a recurring thing so that the thinking becomes part of the activity, because everybody knows that there's only so much the physical can get you to. What the heck is driving the physical? It's this. You look at high level weight training, it's mental in the way they imagine the fibers twitching, or they squeeze in a certain spot. It's not the muscle. At some point, the muscles can only go so far. This right here is almost unlimited, and it seems like a good way, a good set of knowledge to help increase the excellence in the activity. So I think having some clinics twice a year to start with, awesome. Eventually, I've been wanting to put something together for individuals to download for themselves, which I'm just really busy, but I still have a goal to do that. And I wanted to kind of put it in Shannon Church's name that, look, anybody, you could probably download it for free, but please pay $5 to get it. So, that's kind of what I'd like to set up. So in the meantime, maybe some advocacy from the activity asking for that, for some clinics, I'll be happy to do it. You know, you don't have to pay me. I'll go out and do it, whatever. And then eventually developing something for, more concrete, like a workbook or something like that, that again, donate to Shannon and his family if they're okay with it. That's kind of what I would imagine would be the next couple steps.
Mitch, thank you for having this conversation with us. It was really great.
Yeah, it's always great when we have something. It's not out of the box, but it is out of the box compared to what we've grown up
Oh yeah.
doing, you know.
Yeah, but it's important. I remember, Mitch, when you and I reconnected a couple of years ago at Coats rehearsal, finals day, and one question you had asked me was, the activity has obviously progressed as far as like what they're doing, but what has remained the same? And the only thing I could think of was that these kids are coming of age. They're growing up, and it is such that has remained consistent. And us as staff people are the caretakers of that, the stewards of that. And this is this is why these kinds of conversations are so massively important. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we signed off, or are we good?
Maybe just quickly to jump off a little bit of what you said there about that developmental event, that spot. You're not only stewards of that, but there's great power in that as an instructor. You have a bunch of individuals all at that stage at the same time, and make it adventure. Now, the adventure is about slaying the dragon. In this case, the dragon is excellence. And so really keeping that reframing of you're going to go to battle. What does that mean? You're going to be tired. You're going to hate it, but you're going to kill that dragon. And this has connected us for just forever, for very long periods. Just being stewards of the adventure too, and the power of a bunch of people doing it together. You have a collective version of that, all added together. And if you turn up the excellence a little in 150 people or whatever it is now, look at the effect. So it's not just stewards, it's use the power of it. Use the power of it to keep them.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, everyone, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. I want to wish George a good summer tour. Mm-hmm. And I can't wait to see the Blue Stars drumline.
No lot videos from me.
No.
This summer.
No George Collin lot video. That's going to be weird.
Everybody, please come out and join us in the lot. Connect. Let's connect as a community in the lot. I'm really looking forward.
Let's
to
hype up the Blue Stars.
Yeah.
FCO, not Carpe Diem. FCO,
not Carpe Diem.
Yeah, go for it. Hey, hey, man, did you guys see the 2023 cadets by any chance? The last drum line they put out.
Oh yeah.
Dude, that was a ridiculously talented line.
Yeah. I remember. We were in the lot together. Mitch.
They didn't score higher. Yeah, okay, because they were like.
They got fourth in drums that year, right?
Yeah. I don't remember.
I think so. I think they got fourth.
You know what's funny, Mitch, is the performer who was section leader that year, 23, and the summer before 22. He's actually going to be on Blue Star staff this summer.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Great. And guy with the glasses, right?
Yeah, exactly. His name's Alex.
The guy from Rhythmic Force?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I just want to give hats off to that line because man, that was unbelievably good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were I'm glad I got to see that in person. Their last lot, But all right, everyone, that's going to wrap it up from us. And George is going to be busy this summer. I might try to do a couple solo podcasts, depending on if I don't get lazy or not. But regardless, we want to try to have these more often. And I know sometimes we go some long periods, but we'll try to get back in on it. Let us know what you think. As always, let us know what you think in commenting on YouTube or on whatever podcast service you're listening to this on. And we'll see you next time in the lot. Good night, everyone.